Welcome to the show. Today's topic is transitioning through life's changes. I want to introduce us as Rozlyn Reynolds, Terri Ann
Hello.
Russell,
Hi.
and I'm Ivory LaNoue. We are the Sedona Soul Sisters. And I want to say hello to our listeners in London, England. I see us gathering listeners there week after week. We so appreciate it, especially with all the spiritualism you have there. Thank you for tuning in to our show. So let's jump into this. I was thinking about it this morning. Between the three of us at this point in our life, I know for a fact we have transitioned a lot of crazy changes in life, right, ladies?
We could be experts.
We could write a book about this. Well, we could at least write how we transitioned it. I was thinking about your recent changes, Terri Ann. I mean, that's been pretty big, with when you lose somebody, when you get married, when you lose somebody, when there's a divorce, when there's a move. I mean, all these things that happen. I've lived in 36 houses in my life, and that is about 30 too many, in my opinion. So some of that was against my will. Like, as childhood, my dad had built houses and remodeled them, and we'd live in it, sell it, move. But that's still too much. So ladies, what's a example of a transition you've lived through and how you got through it? Let's start there. The wheels are turning.
Where to start? Man, you can go all the way back, right? It's like
go as far back as you want.
Childhood. One of my biggest ones I remember was being about 14 and moving from New York to New Jersey. And it was shell shock for me. Going from the city, which really, we lived on Long Island, so it really wasn't city, but the type of people in the neighborhood we lived in and the schools I went to compared to moving now to New Jersey. I want to use the word more bougie that we use nowadays. So totally shell shocked. I don't really understand how I survived it at that time, but I do think when you're younger, you're much more resilient as opposed to when you get older.
I think so, but staying flexible helps, being open to, like, if you look at changes as opportunity and adventure, sometimes it comes in horrible packages. Like, the reason it happens is very difficult. But if you can look at it as something positive, let's see what's out there, let's see what's next. I think as an adult, I think that helps.
Yeah, and being more curious, like as a child, with that wonderment about it too, like you were just saying, like what's going to come, like daydreaming about, what can come of that rather than focusing on the fear behind it. Like I was just telling Ivory Roz, we're in the midst of a transition now and going to Tennessee, I think. So this show is so appropriate.
Yeah. I figured I'd let you share that. That's your news.
Trying to practice what I preach, right? So I do trust my guides and my angels in the universe, and I'm looking at it with that wonderment of what can happen, the good things that can happen, the good things that will come, rather than focusing on any fear that's around making a big change like that. Because anytime you make a big change, it's scary.
It's a beautiful state.
It is
beautiful there. Absolutely, boy. I've seen some pictures of there, and I just thought, wow, gorgeous. And of course, I'm kind of country oriented, so that's like step into heaven.
Roz, you might need to turn your video off because your audio is super slow. See if that helps.
Okay, let me see
until the lovely internet in Sedona straightens itself out today. While you're doing that,
now it actually says my internet is back, so
it's just slow. That's all. But I was going to say, going back to something similar to what you're saying, Terri Ann, it reminded me, like when I was in the middle of my junior year of high school, my parents decided we're moving from Frederick, Maryland, outside of the DC area, to Prescott, Arizona. So I grew up in a preppy area. I wore the plaid skirts and the knee-high socks and the leather shoes and the cardigans. Like that's what we wore. And then we moved to Prescott and there's cowboys.
Wow.
And everybody was super friendly and welcoming. That's not a problem. But talk about shell shock. Like I wanted to go back. I loved my life in Frederick. I did not want to leave. And Thomas Johnson High School was a huge high school. I had a great boyfriend. I was having fun in school plays. But what really helped was I ended up staying in Prescott 39 years, just so you know, so it can't have been awful. But I threw myself into groups, getting involved in theater. I was always in singing in groups, and that helped for the year and a half I had left. And then I threw myself into lots of community activities. And so I was so involved in the community in different groups and things that I was having a ball. And then I realized it's been, like at that point, 20 years that I've been here. Clearly, I have found it to work for me. So I think if we kind of let go of what we've lost and focus on what we could do in our new circumstances, really helps a lot.
Yeah.
Roz, did you think
that's shell shock though, right? It's like anytime you go to a new state or even just visiting a new state, when we were traveling, every state was so different and the energy was so different. And so you go to different places and they have total different ways of doing things, right? Like the way they drive, where they eat, how they order. Like I know when we lived on the East Coast and we would visit down south, and they were so laid back and so slow. And so coming from that city life and going down, you were like, come on, let's go, but it really forced you to then be in that space of slowing down. But it can be challenging and it can be emotional, right? I mean, there's no doubt about it that this life sometimes can be difficult.
Absolutely. Roz, did you think of a transition you survived and how you got through it?
I think one of the biggest transitions and wake-up calls for me was when my dad experienced some severe health issues when I was a teenager. And suddenly, it just became obvious. My mother wasn't working when he became ill. And first, it looked like they were going to be able to get him kind of back on his feet, but we weren't sure that he was going to be able to do the kind of work he'd always done. And he did not get back really to full health for about 3 to 4 years. And unfortunately, my parents, were financially not, up in the wealth category. So it just became very obvious. I remember I was 14 and it became very obvious that I needed to get a job. And I wasn't old enough where we lived to qualify to get a, traditional kind of a job in a workplace. And I couldn't drive yet. So it ended up that I decided to clean houses. So I kind of had my own little business and I started cleaning houses. And I really had to kind of get my feet under me with that, because the reality sort of hit that, like, okay, I'm not going to have the things that I need. I'm not going to have, I was all of a sudden kind of going from being, one height to shooting up a few inches. So all of a sudden, none of my clothes fit. That I was like, whoa, this isn't good. So I just started, thinking of ways to make money. And that was a transition, literally from kid to adult. Like it just landed. And I actually think I'm always convinced that we have to look for what we're learning and what's going on with that. And it was a wake-up call, but it was also a really good transition for me, because by the time I was, that started when I was about 14. By the time I was 15, I was on top of it. And then I had a little sports injury myself that sort of sidelined my action for a bit. And between those two things, it was like suddenly fast forward to grown up. And it was pretty interesting. I feel like, when we transition from one maturity level to another, that's a big deal. And it was definitely, for me, a wake up. And I feel like, I've always, as you guys know, I've always been, I was known as a Jesus freak when I was young, and I've always had a relationship with Jesus. And so consequently, I just kind of prayed a lot about it, focused on it. And I think that was the first really true step into transitioning to adulthood that was like my eyes flew open. And I was like, whoa, I better get it together here. And I think it was very positive in the long run. And as soon as I was able to, unfortunately, my dad's recovery took a while. And so it was a kind of like quantum leap for me. And I feel like it was, looking back on it, I kind of go, wow, I really made a huge shift there. At the time, I felt like I was just kind of like trying to figure out all the angles. So
there's always some floundering involved. Go ahead, Terri Ann.
It makes sense, doesn't it? That knowledge, the development you get, all of that experience at the time, like when you think it's a difficult time in your life and you're going through these transition and changes, you're gaining so much, but so often we're focusing on what we don't have or what we're not doing, but we're gaining and we're learning and we're growing at that time, and those are really expansive times for us.
Always. I 100% agree. And I'm thinking about a very recent transition, which was leaving my last relationship. And then that was the first time I had lived alone because I had my daughter young. So I was a single parent with her in between relationships. And it was really scary for me, like to try to sleep at night. I was very scared to try to sleep at night. Had a lot of terror about that. And I had to soothe myself, but the angels helped a lot. I mean, having that relationship with angels where you can eventually see them and they let you know they're there. And then it feels very safe to just go to sleep if you have an issue like that. But just getting used to not being in a couple was a real transition. And it was hard in some ways, like not having that companion to do things with or somebody there when you come home to tell about your day. But what I decided to focus on was the serenity that I gained because it was not a healthy relationship. And I was upset a lot. There was just a lot to be upset about in that relationship. But I had serenity and I could just have peace of mind. And then I also focused on, oh, wow, this is the first time in my life I can eat what I want, stay up as late as I want, go see a movie on the spur of the moment if I want. And I got to tell you, 8 years later, I still value those things. It's pretty cool to have that kind of freedom. And I think back to when my daughter graduated high school, her plan was she wasn't sure what she wanted to major in. So she said, I'm going to go to the community college for at least a year. So she'd be staying home. And I was like, oh, good. I'm not done with her yet. I want more time with her. And then 2 weeks later, she's like, I'm leaving, moving to Phoenix. I'm enrolled in this art institute and I start in 2 weeks. And then she was gone. And so I remember her bed was still there, and I would sit on the edge of that bed and sob every day. I couldn't walk past her
Aw.
room without falling apart. My husband at the time would find me in there just crying, and it was just horrible. And I finally said, I think we need to get this furniture out of here. And I boxed up her things she hadn't picked up because it was just too much, and turned it into an exercise room and craft room. And that helped. And then I started like, okay, now I have a place I can work out every day. That's good. And I started thinking kind of similar thoughts like, hey, you know what? I got married so young and I had a child so soon that I really didn't have the 20s to have my freedom like most people do because I had a child. So I just kind of explored a lot of things. I joined some social groups and got really involved, made a ton more friends, and sang more than ever. And all of that really helped me transition to this new stage of life. You know, it's just change is hard, right?
It is hard. And I remember too when Eric went off to college, and your whole dynamic of your family changes. Even though I had other children and I had just had a baby, your whole dynamic change. Like, it's just not you guys every holiday. And now he wasn't coming home, or he would come home, drop all his things and run out the door and see all his friends, you know. I was like, I thought you were coming home. So everything changes. And I remember somebody said to me once, what's that quote? The only thing that changes in life, the only thing that's constant in life is change. So there's constantly throughout your life, there's these changes. And I think if you don't really learn how to get on top of that or transition through those, it can be really difficult for you.
You can, and it doesn't mean we're going to get a grip on it right away. You might struggle. You might really mourn what you're leaving behind, the things that aren't in your life anymore, whether it's children moving on, relationships ending, jobs ending. You know, that can be really traumatic. It's a lot of things in life. I think right now, I was talking to clients about this twice in the last couple of days. What's going on in the world right now is all this change. And I think a lot of people who are not really on a spiritual journey and in tune with themselves, they've sensed that big change happening, but they don't really know what it is. And so they're reacting with fear, and they're sending that fear out in other directions. So it's important to really tune into what's the basis of what you're feeling. Why, what am I feeling first? Let's put a name on it. That's an important one. Like in therapy, what am you feeling? Put a name on that. Why do you feel that way? And no matter what's happened in your life, it really helps you kind of get grounded to put a name on it and go, oh, I'm depressed. Okay, I need to work on that depression. I need to do something to lift my spirits. But if you just sort of wallow and you don't even really know what you're experiencing, it's harder to get through it.
I think also it's, it truly is a test of the soul, a lot of these things, because during a lot of these moves, shifts, life-changing events, what it really comes down to is you tapping into your faith and knowing that whatever's happening, wherever you go, whatever you do, you're going to be connected, to your guidance, to your angels and guides, and also to know that within yourself, you have the wherewithal to get through all this. I mean, we do hit that dark night of the soul a lot of times in these events. And that's when you really have to just, grab with and hang on, hang on.
Remember that kitten poster? Hang on, baby.
Yeah.
Hang in there, baby,
through it.
something like that. That was
Get
very
through it.
popular in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sometimes you are just trying to survive certain things, and that dark night of the soul is a real hard one. People can get put into one of those through a whole variety of things. Loss is the easiest one. That definitely happened to me. And my daughter was 15, and she had made a serious suicide attempt. And then 3 months later, her father killed himself. And we were divorced. We were both remarried, but that hit me so hard. I mean, I know it's probably, a lot of it was close to losing my daughter and how much she means to me and how scary that was. But then it really was devastating to have to tell her about her dad and help her navigate through that emotionally. And she still is, all these years later, she still is. So, there's no timetable you can put on your grief. You don't know how it's going to hit you or how long it's going to last. And it's different for everybody. And so you have to be gentle with yourself and others grieving during that time, and just let them grieve and let them talk if they need to talk. And you need to find somebody to talk to if you've experienced a loss. I think talking about it is really important. Having somebody who's willing to listen to what's going on in your head and how you're feeling can really help just get your feet under you again a little bit. And day by day, it gets better until eventually you realize, hey, I haven't cried in like a month. That's amazing.
Yeah, and don't listen to what other people say about grief, because everybody's journey is so different. That's what I've learned. It's every single person I've met that has gone through grief in one way or the other has experienced it so differently. And there's so many variables that determine how that person feels. And it can be different. And we could talk about the stages of grief and the stages of healing, and that you go back and forth. And so, yeah, it's so individualized. I think it's important to express how you're feeling about it. And when you're speaking to somebody that has grief, don't tell them how they should feel. I've had a lot of people try to tell me how I should feel. And that just doesn't work for me.
I kind of did it to myself. I would be like, you shouldn't be grieving. You weren't even married to him anymore, but he was my first love. He was, he was my daughter's father, so you just can't control how you're going to feel, how you're going to react. And that's not just true for the death of a loved one, but all kinds of things. I mean, I think most people have either been fired or laid off from a job unexpectedly at some point in their life. And that's a shock. You don't see that coming. There was a whole lot of that in the last 2.5 years, where lots and lots of people losing their jobs. And that's a transition that's just very, very hard. What do you do if you don't have money to survive? That's not just a mental thing to overcome. You've got to get your act together and find a way. I think a lot of people have kind of stepped off the treadmill, like leaving corporate life, not working for somebody else, and coming up with a way to make a living on their own, to like work in their own business and have control over that. That has actually been a solution for a lot of people, and especially older people, not just during the pandemic, but all along. Older people who, with ageism, it starts like in the mid 40s, where companies will not want to hire you as much as younger people. You're more likely to be laid off or let go. And so those people become self-employed. They find ways to be self-employed so they don't have to deal with that. And that's a way to weather a transition too.
Very true.
I think about all the times, Roz, you've been in Sedona in business and then left, and then were called back here. Like, how did you deal with that? Because I know it's kind of against your will, really.
That's putting it mildly.
Yeah, I was being polite.
Yeah, I have found that when I get in, I can be so stubborn. And when I get into that stubborn mode, and I'm just determined that I'm going to do it my way, and everybody better get out of my way. That's always when the angels come in and go, we have a different plan for you.
By the way.
Yeah. So you just have to kind of really flow with it a little bit. Because the last thing I ever thought, I mean, I wasn't gone from here that long, but the last thing I really ever thought was that I was going to come back, because I had really made up my mind. nope, I'm not a desert person. That's not working for me. I need to be where there's an ocean. And I do miss it. Oh, I miss it.
Yeah.
But where I want to be is not always where God's idea of what I'm supposed to be doing and where I'm supposed to be is. So you gotta flow with those transitions. You really do. But it was, in the case of me coming back here, I didn't come back here with the intention of working. That was, the big aspect of that's kind of humorous about that. I came back, because one of my children needed to reconnect with a treatment situation that he had here, and somebody who I really respected their ability to work with.
Oh,
Uh-oh.
Roz just froze. We have terrible internet in Sedona, and actually Terri Ann and I are not in Sedona because we can only have one person live on the show from our office at any given time.
Not today.
So, yeah, today we can't even handle one. So poor Roz, she is frozen. I want to say, like, when that happens, just kind of my last thought on this today, if it's about your spiritual journey and you're being called to go somewhere, do something that you are resistant about, think back to the times your angels and your guides have instructed you to do something and it worked out great. What did you gain from it? What were the wonderful surprises? Because that helps you feel trust about listening again and going forward with grace and trust again. I can't tell you how many times, like even moving to Sedona, quitting my job in mental health, which was, I had the best job I'd ever had in mental health, loved it. And I had no intention of retiring from mental health ever. And my angel's like, now you got to move across the mountain. You're going to move to Sedona. You're going to work. You're going to do your spiritual work full time, using your name, showing your face. I'm like, I was hanging on to the door frame. But it's been great because I do still get to do a lot of mental health work. So I don't have to miss that. And I help people in even more profound ways, that it's just very soul satisfying work to do. And I wouldn't change this for anything. So I'm going to trust if my angels guide me towards something else, I'm going to trust, because I know what's happened from the previous times, that I don't need to freak out. I know that there's something better ahead. I'm going to help people even more. And it's true for you too. Do you have a last thought on this, Terri Ann?
Yeah, I would just say try to relax through it without having to try and figure it all out. Sometimes we just want to figure it all out, right? We want to know. I know for me, I'm very type A organized. I want to know all the steps. And sometimes you just have to, like you said, the universe is showing you it's so easy, and you just have to go, okay, I'm going to go. I don't have all the answers yet, but I trust that they've brought me this far. They're not just going to leave me out in the cold all of a sudden.
That's my motto right there. They're not going to drop the ball on me now. And I know that's true. Well, I want to thank you for tuning in today. Thank you for listening or watching us on YouTube. And please join us next Friday. It is our end of the month alien race episode. And we're going to be talking about the Nordics, also known as tall whites. That'll be very interesting. In the meantime, we hope you have an enlightening week.